Another episode of Public Health Insider. I am your host, Jade Brown, and today we will be discussing the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. Oh, my throat. Okay, so today my guest is Silas Wilson, the liaison officer for St. Jude. Silas, how are you?
Hi, good morning, Jade, and good morning to your listeners. I'm doing wonderful. It's nice to be back here after a few weeks, but I'm happy to be here to provide your listeners and the country at large with a synopsis of where we are at this project.
Okay, great.
At this time.
Okay, fantastic, Silas. Silas, tell us where we are right now. I mean, where you left off was when you came onto the show and we discussed about the tendering process. Mm-hmm. So since then, what has happened?
All right. Well, the last time I was here was back in March, and I did indicate that we were almost at the point where the deadline for the tenders was upon us. The deadline for tenders for both the supervision and the construction side of the project were received back in March of this year. Since then, the ministry has done the evaluation to both of those tenders, the one for the supervision of the project as well as the one for the works component of the project. And I need to point out that the one for the works component of the project also includes, very importantly, the issue of procurement of medical equipment.
Okay.
So we have not yet signed any of those contracts. We have made very good progress in the last few weeks towards ensuring that all of the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. All of the components required to ensure that we bring the hospital into full operation can be completed. So that is currently being done. So as soon as that is done, the public would be informed that we have been able to sign contracts for both the construction side as well as the supervision side. But we have made very good progress on those two fronts in the last few weeks. Again, I just want to repeat that we have not yet signed the contracts. The tenders were published in January. The deadlines were back in March of this year for both the construction and supervision. But we have made very good progress towards ensuring that we sign those contracts in very short order. And as soon as that is done, the public is going to be updated on those two developments.
Okay. And how confident are we that because people would always pose that question. Mm-hmm. I will get the call at least once a week. Jay, when we get in the hospital, I know that there are steps to take, and this is one of them. This is in fact one of the most important steps that we have to take in terms of the procurement process. What is entailed in that procurement process?
Well, as anything else, as I said earlier, there were tender notices that went out. It was not just for local companies, but it was an international tender.
Okay.
It was published here locally. It was published internationally as well.
But does that mean, sorry to cut you short, but would there be a lot of local employment?
Well, I mean, the tenders are only for the construction and the supervision part of it.
Okay. Most
of the people obviously would be St. Lucians that we would expect in the end to be doing all of the work. The majority of them would be St. Lucians, that we believe. But that involves getting tenders. We did get more than one tender for all of the components, both supervision and the works project of the hospital. Those tenders have already been evaluated, and that is a normal exercise in tendering, especially when you have an international tender. The tenders have to be evaluated, and of course the technical team over at the Saudi mission is in receipt of the evaluation reports. They have mulled through the reports, and so we believe in very short order we should be moving to look at the financial component of the tenders with a view to signing off on those on those contracts. So the technical aspect of it, the evaluations have been done, and we are waiting word so that we can move to looking at the financial side of it. And as soon as that is done, we believe we should be in a position to officially sign on the dotted line contracts with the two prospective contractors, so we can proceed with the second component, and I need to say it's a very important component of the overall project, because it would bring into completion your two primary buildings where your services are going to be provided from. That is the East Wing, where you would have downstairs all of the outpatient clinics,
Right.
and upstairs you would have your wards, medical wards, maternity wards, etc., etc. And of course, on the West Wing, you would have downstairs accident and emergency. You would have your imaging, your laboratory, and as well as your central sterile department. And when you move upstairs, the West Wing, you would now have the operating theater, your endoscopy department,
Right.
your ICU, as well as your recovery rooms for your surgical recovery rooms as well, would be upstairs, the West Wing. So those two buildings are very important components of the entire hospital operation. But those contracts also, as I said earlier, would involve the provision of medical equipment. And I want to say a little bit about medical equipment a little later on. But also the contracts would include completing all of your perimeter works, so your access roads around the hospital, completing the car parks, equipping the hospital with all of the IT infrastructure, all of the security infrastructure, adding in there as well the climate smart technology that we're going to add in there. I've said it before and I will say it again. The objective also is to ensure that a full photovoltaic system is included in that hospital to, as far as possible, reduce the consumption of electricity from our electricity provider, Lucelec, that the hospital would utilize. And also to implement a rainwater harvesting system. Obviously, with all what we see happening now with climate change, a rainwater harvesting system is a very important system. We're now in an extended drought. And so that would certainly allow the hospital to be able to harvest rainwater during the peak of rainfall that can be used at this point in time of the year for attending to the services that are required around the hospital, attending to the yard, the landscaping, etc., etc. And the photovoltaic system is, of course, going to largely reduce the consumption of energy that the hospital would require. And that would certainly provide the hospital with more resources that they can attend to more important things that the hospital would require for the day-to-day operations of the hospital. So we are looking forward for the day when the contracts would be signed very soon, and I'll be very happy to come back here with you and certainly give you that good news, and I think St. Lucians are looking forward to it. But we are, at the Department of Economic Development, we are very anxious for that to happen. We are very excited. I think it certainly marks a new dispensation for the St. Jude Hospital that has gone through a very sad history over the last 14 years. This year it's going to be 15 years that they've been operating from the stadium. And we're hoping that there would not be another anniversary of the fire after this year, where services are still very far from being moved over to the OJ site. And so we're very excited about the prospects of completing the hospital. It certainly gives us a lot to be excited about at this time. And we're very happy with that. I want to
talk a bit about, sorry to cut you there, but can we talk a bit about the works that have been done or are currently ongoing?
Sure, no problem. It's no secret, the government has announced, and the Prime Minister earlier in the year during his New Year's presentation, New Year's address, as well as in the budget appropriation and policy debate that we had earlier this year, did make mention of the fact that work is advanced on 4 buildings that are required to bring the entire facility into operation. And these 4 buildings are the West Wing, which would be the admin offices upstairs, and the kitchen cafeteria for the hospital downstairs.
Right.
You have the laundry, maintenance, and power building. That is also fairly advanced. And you also have work on 2 other buildings that would offer medical services, and that would be the dialysis building and the physiotherapy building. Work is very advanced on those buildings, and we still believe that the timeline given of July, we are within reach of that. Despite the fact that there was a very extensive delay in the contractor receiving doors and HVAC equipment that had been in Jamaica, quite a lot of containers, and the shipping lines had a lot of challenges to get all of those containers here in St. Lucia. They have started to arrive, some of them, that is, not all, but we expect in the days ahead that those components of that facility will be given some attention, and the remaining works that are required after that is done should still put us well within our July deadline to complete those 4 buildings. I need to add one thing, however, and I think it's necessary that I say that. In as much as we're going to complete those 4 buildings now, it does not mean that those 4 buildings are going to be immediately put into service by the general public.
Okay.
Because we still need to bring the rest of the facility into a stage where it is completed, that you can do that. And if I can just say one thing here on that, for the purposes of dialysis, you would need to have your medical waste treatment plant in operation before you can start administering dialysis services on the site. You would need to have your all of your water treatment plants in place as well, because dialysis is a very involved process that it requires proper disposal of medical waste. But not just that alone, it also requires some inputs that will not be available unless the entire site is brought into operation.
Understood.
So while those buildings are going to be completed, they would not be brought into use unless the rest of the entire facility is ready for occupation.
How important was it to commence with those buildings, the dialysis unit, physiotherapy, and so on?
Those buildings were, if I should say, had the least amount of challenges involved in it.
Okay.
In that we needed to do less design reviews on those buildings.
Okay.
There was not a need for extensive review of those buildings to see how they could have been made to be used by the end user in an ideal fashion, which is why we decided to tackle those buildings upfront. Not that I'm saying that there were no challenges with them, but you had a lot less challenges with those buildings. With the East Wing and the surgical wing, there was a need for more design review to ensure that those buildings were compliant, that they were possible to get them accredited, that they met the end users' expectations. And over the last year and 6 months, we've done extensive site visits with the St. Jude team to ensure that all of their concerns have been addressed as best as possible. All of the issues in terms of how the building was going to flow. Our accreditation, I think Accreditation Canada was there with you once.
Yes.
And they spoke about creating an optimum flow to ensure that you have an environment that your patients are comfortable, that your staff can work well, that you can reduce as best as possible cross-contamination. And I think COVID has brought a lot of those things into sharper focus for us now. And so we have conducted all of those reviews on those additional areas that required extensive discussion, review, etc., etc. We have done so. We have been blessed with a good team at Caribbean Consulting Engineers, CCE. They have been very up to the task, and they've ensured that the end users' concerns have been addressed as much as possible. But we also have to recognize that we're working within a framework of buildings that are significantly advanced. So there had to be some trade-offs along the way. But those trade-offs have not resulted in the buildings not being in a position where you have been able to get what is the best flow that you can get, and that we've not sacrificed accreditation as well in the process. So we believe what we have now been able to achieve in terms of the changes, the design reviews, best captures the expressions of the end users, as well as those involved in accreditation as well.
Okay. All right. So in terms of the status of those buildings, we're near complete. Like you said, I'm just reviewing what you've said. And you spoke about the doors, and these are kind of like finishing touches.
Yes, this certainly would be finishing touches. You can't finish the building if you don't have the doors. The electrical works on those buildings, all of the MEPs are at an advanced stage, but the critical things that were also needed would have been your HVAC equipment, and it's a hospital, and you must have the right HVAC equipment, which all of those things had to be sourced outside of St. Lucia, and there were some delays in getting them here, but it has not really affected our timeline. The contractor was able to shift his work program around to ensure that those delays did not impact upon the broader time that those buildings were supposed to have been completed. And we expect much the same to happen as well when we move into the remaining buildings, that wherever there are some issues with procurement of stuff that comes outside of St. Lucia, that we can find a way to mitigate its impact on the final completion of the overall project.
As the liaison officer on this very highly controversial project, how confident are you in the delivery of the St. Jude Hospital finally after some 14 years?
I recognize that there are a lot of people who do not believe that St. Jude is anywhere near completion. I'm not saying that it is going to be completed tomorrow, and I want to be very, very clear about that. But I believe that if all goes well, that St. Jude would be completed well ahead of the time that a lot of people believe that it is going to be completed. I strongly believe that St. Jude is not just going to be completed ahead of the next general elections, which are not due until 2026. But I want to go a little further and say that it will be completed, that all of the equipment and the entire facility would be ready for testing, commissioning, and the delivery of healthcare services would be done from the OJ site of the St. Jude Hospital way ahead of the 2026 general elections. That undertaking, I believe I can strongly give you here today. Most of what we need for the project is already in place. The design reviews have been completed. The tenders are in. We haven't signed a contract yet, but it's not far away. And we believe that we understand what is needed to be done. And we do not anticipate that St. Jude's will tarry on into another administration. As long as there is nothing that I can't predict happening with St. Jude, we believe that it is going to be completed well ahead of the date of the next general election.
Your level of optimism is very admirable. What makes you so optimistic about this?
Well, I've said to you that we've done a lot of the work that needs to be done. I wanted to speak about equipment here and to tell you how optimistic we are about finishing the facility. In April, while I had said to you previously that we had already gotten a list of equipment from the users of the facility, St. Jude, we went one step further in April, and we had some more robust, extensive discussion with St. Jude, with all of the clinical departments, one at a time, to review that list and to review the specifications, to ensure that the equipment that we were getting, that had been proposed, somebody didn't just stay and pluck out from thin air defibrillators and cardiac monitors, but that the specifications also were what the end user required what they are accustomed of working with, what they believe is the best option that is currently available on the market that they can work with. So we've done all of those things as well in preparation for the signing of the next contract, so that as soon as we have ink on paper, that the contractor can go to market and begin to source that equipment that is required for us to ensure that you don't just have a hospital, but you have a proper functioning hospital that delivers first-class world care services, health services to the clients in the South. We don't just want a hospital. And we've gone this far to ensure that you don't just have a hospital with buildings, but you also have a hospital that is equipped with technology and personnel. St. Jude on their end, Miss Lydia Atkins, the CEO of St. Jude, and her team already have a commissioning team in place. And they are beginning to look at all of the processes that need to be relooked at when they move to that new facility. So all of that work is happening simultaneously. So by the time the buildings are ready for occupation, you would have done all of the work on her end as well, on their end as well, the user's end, where the staff are now prepared to move into that facility. All of the training on the new equipment is done, so that they would not be walking into equipment that they know nothing of. They would not be walking into an area that they know nothing of. And again, I want to make the point here that we have taken the time to ensure that we facilitate the end users as far as we can. I spoke about the design review, but the design review was not done in isolation. They came to the site, they visited the areas that they're supposed to be working with, and said to us, can we have this, can we have that? Can you change this, can you change that?
Stakeholder consultation.
Very important.
Transparency on this project, and what is the difference between now and then in terms of transparency?
Well, I can't tell you what happened then because I was not involved in the project previously. I only became involved in this project in 2022. I have heard stories about what happened before that, but I don't wish to say them out here.
But how important is transparency to you and to this administration?
Well, to the team that I work with, I can tell you, we are very high on this. We know that we're designing a facility, we're building a facility, but we're not building it for ourselves. We are building a facility for the individuals that will be using it in the end. We are not building it for ourselves, we are building it for people that will be using it in the end, which is why we have insisted from very early that the process of discussion, dialogue, ensuring that what we do reflects what it is that they want be done. So there have been times when we've not been able to agree on everything, and that's normal in the environment that we're working in. Because if that were possible, then I guess all of us would not be here today if we could have always gotten everything that we want.
Right.
So we've had to make trade-offs along the way. But I can say to you that we don't do it just for the records to show that we do it, but we do it because we understand that the facility is a facility that has to be used by the end users, the hospital administration people. And their concerns are important to us, and we've tried along the way as far as possible to accommodate all of their concerns, to capture them as succinctly as we can, and to ensure that the final product is reflective of what it is that they would have loved to walk into when we open the hospital.
Okay. As we draw the program to a close, I'd like for you to encapsulate your message very simply for our viewers. Because sometimes our listeners and the people in St. Lucia, when they hear, all of our technical jargon, and although you've done an excellent job at explaining, just leave them with some parting words.
All right. Well, I'll put it 3 different ways. One, that the government has started work on 4 buildings and is very advanced on 4 buildings. The building that dialysis patients will be offered treatment from, and the building that will be used for physiotherapy. There's also the West Wing, which would be where the hospital's administration and the kitchen is going to be. And there's a laundry, maintenance, and an electrical room that would control all the electrical power into that entire site. Those 4 buildings are fairly advanced, and we expect them to be finished towards the end of July of this year. The government put out a tender for the remaining components of the entire facility, the east wing, the surgical wing, and to also bring into operation all of the other buildings, the morgue, the warehouse, the rest of the facility, all of your services, your roads, your parking lot, medical equipment, as well as the climate smart technology that we're going to incorporate into the hospital. We have not yet signed a contract for that, but we are not very far from doing it. A lot of progress has been made over the last few weeks, and we are getting very close to signing a contract with a contractor for the works component of that project, but also importantly, for the supervision of the remaining part of the project, a consultant for the remaining part of the project. Those 2 contracts, we believe, we are not too far from signing off on them. If all goes well, we believe that should happen pretty soon. We have ensured along the way that we have accommodated as far as possible the staff at the St. Jude Hospital, clinical staff and others, looking at the building, seeing how it is that we can make adjustments, we can make changes that can best capture what they believe is the best flow, best arrangement that we can have in those buildings. We've engaged the accreditation people as well, Accreditation Canada as well. They've been to the site a number of times. They've seen for themselves critical areas, the lab, the imaging department, the A&E, to look at to ensure that we have a facility that can provide top quality health services to the people of the South and the country in general. We at the Department of Economic Development believe that we are entering an area where we can be very proud that we are finally going to complete this facility. We believe we are on solid ground. We have done all of the, and I used that term the last time, the heavy lifting that we had to do. The monies are available from the Saudi. We've done all of the preliminary work. We have gotten the permission from the Development Control Authority, the DCA. We've been able to get that as well. We have done all the design reviews. The tenders are out, and we're just awaiting the signature on the dotted line so that we can move into the rest of the buildings, complete those buildings, complete the sidewalks, complete the footpaths on the facility, complete the parking lots, all the access roads that you need to access the hospital from, hospital services from the back, from the front, etc., etc. Put in all the IT infrastructure, put in all the security infrastructure that is required for a hospital of that kind. We believe we are nearing that stage very soon. And so St. Lucians can rest assured that St. Jude is a priority for this government, and we are doing everything that is humanly possible to ensure that an end is brought to the saga that has become the St. Jude Hospital for the last 14 and a half years.
Okay. Thank you so much, Silas. Thank you for giving us that update. We look forward to having you once again on the show. Hopefully, as you indicated, when the signing of the new contract occurs, so we can get an update then. You've, of course, made everything so clear to us. We do invite people to interact with the page on our Facebook Live. Of course, we're always live on Real FM, on NBC Television, and now we are live on YouTube. So if you have missed this program, or if you're just tuning in, you can always go back and take a listen and get that knowledge, equip yourself with that knowledge on the status of the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. This has been Public Health Insider. See you next week, where we discuss universal health coverage.